Sassy B Worldwide Productions. With over 25 years of entertainment experience, we have done it all. Celebrity appearances, red carpet events, image consultation and branding design. Our clients range from American football stars to Hollywood celebrities and everyone in between. Want to make a splash in the entertainment industry? Then it's time to get sassy. SassyBWorldwide.com.
Hi guys, CJ here. We currently have a few positions available for relationship managers. If you would like the opportunity to work in sports marketing, this could be it. The ABA is the largest pro league in the world and partnered with the AAU, representing over 700,000 athletes around the world. Building business relationships and helping bring new audiences to every business we're working with is the goal. We're not limited to one state or region. Businesses partnering with sports is always a win-win for the community. Sound interesting? Then drop us an email and get more information at jobs@aba101.club, and we'll get back to you right away.
Come explore the No Strings Attached e-News online magazine. Our global array of authors inspire, delight, and educate with practical and entertaining articles. And with Focus On, we help producers of film, web series, and other video content attract a wider audience. Plus, your project can stream on Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, and more with our media partners E360 TV and NETV. No Strings Attached e-News, focusing on human interest. Advertising available, nsaen.com.
You're listening to ABA One-on-One Podcast.
Hey guys, it's time for a new episode of ABA One-on-One.
Open up, yeah. Open up now. Open up. Open up, yeah. Open up. Open up now.
Hey guys, welcome back to another ABA One-on-One. CJ and Rick in the house, and we got Scott Tarter from the Dropping Dimes Foundation with us. He's kind of helping out our original league players, you know, with their pension fund and looking into a bunch of other things that he's doing, plus meeting up with some exciting players, the ones that are still kind of out there doing something. Scott, welcome to ABA One-on-One, man. Let's talk basketball.
Thank you very much. Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Rick, you want to kick in first, man?
Yeah, I before we get started, I just want to, I kind of met Scott last few months through Ron Perry, but I just wanted to get a little bit of his background early on before, like where you went to law school, where, just a little bit about your background coming up.
Yeah.
Where you from?
No, very, very quickly, so I don't bore your listeners too much. I was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana, and so even though things have changed over the years, Indiana here in the U.S. is still considered, you know, the hotbed of basketball, right? It's Hoosier hysteria, and even though people don't really connect it that much anymore, when I was a kid, you know, IU won its fifth national championship, its third under Bobby Knight. And, you know, the Indiana Pacers were rocking and rolling on their, you know, three league championships in the ABA. They played in 5 of the 9 championships that the ABA had. So I was born and raised in a basketball state. I went to a small college here in Indiana, then IU Bloomington, of course. I was there during my law school days when Bobby Knight won his 3rd national championship in 1987. So I got a chance to celebrate that. Wow. And then I started practicing law right here in Indiana. And, you know, and then that kind of brings me, you know, here to today.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's extremely impressive, Scott. That's
well, you know, there's a guy in Indiana who's also an Indiana guy. He ended up going to Princeton for a little while, but then he came back to Indiana. His name is Ted Green, and he does documentary films, and he's been quite successful in several of his films. And when I first met him in 2012, 2013, he was doing his documentary on Roger Brown, the great ABA Hall of Fame,
Yes.
Oh yeah.
the Pacers. Right. So I was doing some pro bono legal work for him to help out with that story, which was in essence, a real social justice story about, how Roger Brown made his comeback because of the ABA. It's called Undefeated, by the way, the Roger Brown story. And it's available out there. So if anybody who's an ABA fan wants to look at that documentary, it's a very cool doc. And at that time, I got a chance to meet a bunch of my heroes from my days as a kid in Indiana. And that was Mel Daniels primarily, and Darnell Hillman, Bob Nedelicki, George McGinnis, Freddie Lewis, Tom Thacker. I ended up meeting a ton of the ABA Pacers that I that were my heroes when I was a kid.
Awesome.
And Mel Daniels, the great Hall of Famer, he kept harping all the time on the lack of respect that the NBA gives to the ABA, both in terms of not including ABA statistics within the NBA stats, and also the NBA not providing pensions and healthcare benefits to the ABA players. And his point was, that the two leagues merged and the best of basketball came from the ABA into the NBA, and it exists to this day. So why aren't the ABA players being recognized, for their accomplishments? Well, those conversations led to the formation of the Dropping Dimes Foundation, which is what we call here in the U.S. a 501c3 not-for-profit charity, which means contributions are tax deductible and all that good stuff. And its sole mission is to support former players of the American Basketball Association who have fallen on hard times as a result, in part, at least, in large part, in my mind, of not being folded into the brotherhood of the NBA. So as we sit here today, I'm a co-founder and the CEO of the Dropping Dimes Foundation, and a support company called Lana Sports that also helps support the ABA players on a commercial level.
Okay, that's awesome, man. I'm glad we got you in here.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Oh man. Hey, now you were telling me before we started the show about a player that just recently passed away that I think you said the press and everyone came out for. Who was that?
Well, George Carter, who is an interesting guy. I mean, George contacted the Dropping Dimes Foundation a couple of years ago because he was being evicted from his home that he had lived in for 15 years. He was 74 years old at the time.
Wow.
And he was working a job as a limousine driver in Las Vegas to supplement his Social Security income to get by. Again, not receiving any type of pension, not being eligible for any healthcare benefits from the NBA. And he developed throat cancer, unfortunately, and started going through chemotherapy. And the chemotherapy treatments prevented him from driving, which then put him in a spot, right? And when he reached out to Dropping Dimes, he really needed some help. And George not only averaged over 18 points a game during his career in the ABA, but he is the only guy, I think, to my knowledge, he is the only guy drafted into Major League Baseball here in America, the National Football League here in America, the NBA, and the ABA.
Wow.
And I mean, quite an athlete. He was an ABA All-Star. He was traded for Julius Erving when George played for the New York Nets and Julius played for the Virginia Squires. There was a trade, and George was traded for Dr. J, and that's how he ended up in Virginia. But I guess more importantly, historically, that's how Julius ended up as a New York Net.
Yeah, you know, Scott. That's funny you say that because one of the early shows I mentioned that. I think I want to say 1971. I went to I was home for college, came home for the weekend or whatever, and the Virginia Squires were playing the Kentucky Colonels. And I said, man, I'm going to the game. That turned out to be, it was in Roanoke, Virginia. That was Julius Erving's first game because he came out, I tell those people all the time, he came out a year early out of the University of Massachusetts.
Yep.
The NBA had that rule in those days. You couldn't come into the NBA until your graduating class had gone through.
That's right. That's right. Well, it was Spencer Haywood who was the first one to open that door. But you were at that game. You were at Julius's first game.
First game, I never will forget that. He dunked on he dunked on Artis Gilmore. I didn't bring it up when we had Artis Gilmore.
I bet you didn't.
Thank God, Rick.
But Julius Erving, now keep in mind now, he came out, his afro was about the size of 2 watermelons. But when he took off, I can't even describe it, because that was back before the film and this would be one of the highlights of all time. When he dunked on Gilmore, went behind the backboard and dunked it on the other. It was incredible. And I'm thinking to myself, no one even knew who this guy was.
But hey, Rick, not to be lost to history here is your point, right? I mean, in that during that time period, the NBA, had certain unwritten rules in place that had to do with how many white players would play, would start for a given for a team. The NBA had during the time the ABA started, the NBA was pretty lily white. I mean, all the coaches were white, the owners were white. They had some unwritten rules about the their starters, and sort of more importantly, during the time of the civil rights era in America in the 60s, if you were a black player, either in high school in an inner city area, right, you definitely needed to get to a college, and you had to get to a 4-year program because the NBA wasn't going to take you early. And once you made it to the NBA, you had to, and this doesn't apply to just black guys, this applies to white guys who were from disadvantaged backgrounds, but it impacted primarily the black guys. But you couldn't have, for the black guys, you couldn't have an afro in the NBA. You couldn't have facial hair. You couldn't wear jewelry. You couldn't, you couldn't exercise various forms of self-expression. And that time period in America was sort of all about self-expression. And so, from my standpoint, Rick, you talk about Julius Erving coming in and being such an unusual person. I mean, all the guys from the ABA, he was the tip of the spear, but the ABA, particularly as it relates to the black players, it really ushered in the era of individual expression and fast up tempo style of play. Agreed. And you don't need to walk the walk and talk the talk of what we tell you to do. You just need to be you. And that's the way the NBA is today.
And produce,
of course. Absolutely. Produce. And if you produce, then you wear whatever the hell you want to wear.
Yeah. CJ, I think what you were referring to, Matt Calvin mentioned that. I believe it was Matt Calvin.
Matt Calvin did.
Quotas. Yep. You couldn't only have so many black starters or so many or guys on the floor at the same time, or it was something like that. I don't remember all the details, but it was something like Scott was just talking about.
Hey, well, like I always say, the ABA made the NBA what it is. Can you imagine if this expression would not have been able to happen? Can you imagine what Walt Frazier would have looked like on court?
That's right. That's right.
He would have had like no hair,
Earl Monroe.
So,
well, take a look. Hey, you should, if you take a look at the pictures of Wilt Chamberlain in 1967, and then take a look at which is right the very beginning of the ABA, and then take a look at him in 1971 or 72 when the NBA had been around for a few years. He is a little different.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why we love doing this show, and we love having basketball people on, because you can clearly see how the ABA has, influenced basketball, period, and like even some of the young kids out here, when we show them videos and, try to show them what the league was like back then, and then we show them an NBA video at the same time, and they go, where's the 3-point line? Because that's the first thing they look for. Steph Curry, everybody shooting these threes, so just makes them really see that, what we're doing out here is making some impact. So it's good to have guys like you in there still fighting for it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But it's, I feel like the ABA is such a mythical, almost legendary type league, because the NBA of the 1970s, when the big fight was over, right? I mean, the ABA won more interleague games than the NBA did. They played against each other for 4 years, I believe, and the ABA won substantially more games than the NBA did. And when the merger was completed, the two highest scoring teams in the NBA the year after the merger were the San Antonio Spurs and the Denver Nuggets,
And
right?
the Indiana Pacers. Oh, it was the Nuggets.
It was the Nuggets and the Spurs. Those were the two highest scoring teams in the NBA. And
yeah.
And these are the ABA. They were representing the ABA. Darnell Hillman, right, came straight from the ABA and won the first NBA slam dunk competition. 12 of the 24 players in the NBA All-Star game that year after the merger were ABA
players. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, the impact is undeniable.
Yeah.
Didn't they have that game one time by ABA versus NBA?
They had two of those. They had
I thought they one or two of them. I remember when I was younger.
Yeah, they called them super games, and one was in the Astrodome, and one was in New York, I believe. And the NBA won both of them, but they were nail biters. I mean, the NBA won both, and these were, the absolute stars of the stars from both leagues, and they came right down to the final possession.
Man, that should tell the story right there.
Yeah.
But the whole thing with this merger, that's always been pretty interesting to me. All the stuff that went on behind the doors on who they're going to take, and more importantly, why. Again, it comes down to money, and the St. Louis Spirits, I think, was one of the ones that was originally talked about coming, and then because of the players they had, but they also had some money. I think they ended up suing the NBA or something, didn't they?
Wasn't it ESPN they sued? Or
maybe it was ESPN.
Well, when the first, I'm kind of a geek when it comes to this, so I happen to know a lot about it. The lawyer. So when the merger discussions first started, there were 7 teams that were involved in the formal merger discussions. And that the 4 that came across, right? The Nets, Nuggets, Spurs, and the Pacers. But then also the Kentucky Colonels and the St. Louis Spirits and the Utah Stars. In very early discussions, Virginia was in there. But then the Virginia Squires and Utah died really quickly during that final ABA season, and that left the Colonels and the Spirits. And John Y. Brown, the owner of the Colonels, ended up doing a deal because they didn't want to. They didn't think the NBA didn't want to bring in 6 teams. So John Y. Brown cut a deal to get an ownership position with the Buffalo Braves, who were an NBA team at the time, and took, I think it was a $3 million payment. And then the Colonels died, and Artis Gilmore and all those greats went into the dispersal draft. And Louis Dampier, Dan Issel had already been traded. Then the same thing happened with the Spirits, except the Spirits had a very bright lawyer named Donald Shupak, and the owners of the Spirits, the Silna brothers, Ozzie and Daniel, they cut the deal of the century, and they're the ones who said, okay, instead of taking $3 million, we'll take something like $1 million. It was something much smaller than John Y. Brown got at the time, and then they said, we'll take 1/7 of the TV revenue for the NBA in perpetuity.
Oh, that was the smartest.
So they, the last count, they had collected over $500 million with a B from that deal.
Yeah, that's what I heard too. Wow, I didn't know it went down like that, but that was smart.
Yeah, it was pretty smart.
Wow.
But again, to Rick's point, though, the problem is, you got all these businessmen, and I'm an attorney, so I don't like to rip lawyers for no reason. But the lawyers at the time knew what was going on. The business, and one of them was David Stern, by the way. David Stern was the lawyer representing the NBA in the merger talks. He was with a New York law firm at the time, and you had these very sophisticated lawyers and businessmen representing the NBA, and even Prentice Yancey. A noted Atlanta lawyer who was representing the ABA as a league. These guys all got together in a room, and they cut that deal. But the guys who got screwed, whether it was intentional or not, were the guys who played in the ABA and put in their blood, sweat, and tears in those early years, because the guys who got taken care of, right, was the NBA first and foremost. Then it was the 4 teams who survived. Then it was the two teams who didn't want in the deal, right? The Colonels and the Spirits owners, not the players. And then it was the top players of the time who went into the dispersal draft. But if you were a player who played during the early years of the ABA, you had no representation at that time. And so that's why those guys were not part of the pension. They weren't part of any program for healthcare benefits. They just kind of got forgotten about. And that's why Dropping Dimes exists.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. Hey, I do want to ask, I mean, if you can disclose it, great. If not, that's fine too. But just curious, like, what amount are these players? Are we trying to? Should I say? Are you guys that are in there hustling, trying to earn or get awarded to these players? It wouldn't be like millions of dollars per player or anything, would it? It just
not at all
something that would just help them with life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, CJ. It's so the NBA is now talking to the Dropping Dimes Foundation. We're in direct conversations with them, and we have been now for the past 6 or 8 months. In part, those conversations have been driven by guys like George Carter and Frank Card. These amazing former players who passed away under very unfortunate circumstances. They became very public here in America, and we think that probably helped get the attention of the NBA, about this issue. So we're talking to them at a very high level, and we're engaged in, very significant conversation about this. And what we're talking to them about is providing a pension of $400 per month for every season of play for these players. So it's a modest pension. This is what the NBA gave to the pre-1965 pre-collective bargaining agreement players. They did that without any legal responsibility. I'm not trying to just unjustifiably play the race card here, but those guys those are pre-1965. They happen to be primarily white players.
Yeah,
and they were given this same pension. So I mean, our point is, again, not to play the race card for the wrong reasons, but to me, this isn't a race card. To me, this is going, hey, wait a minute, we've got a group of guys here who have just as much entitlement from a basketball history standpoint as the pre-1965 guys. These are guys who played sporadically within both leagues, and they happen to be majority African American. But why not help these guys out? $400 a month for every year means that the largest pension would be for a guy like a Louis Dampier, say, or a Stu Johnson. A guy who played 9 years, all 9 years of the ABA, would be entitled to $3,600 a month.
Yeah,
that's not crazy money.
That's per diem with some of these players.
Exactly.
Well, real money.
One of the things that I don't know, like me, I'm always kind of a forward thinker, and I watch all these NBA guys of today that do know about the league, and I've always wondered why some of the top guys in the league just didn't come together and do something like that themselves. Everyone put in, 400,000, 300 or whatever, because they do it for the homeless things. They do it for, some kid needing something or whatever. I just always wondered why a lot of especially the African-American players, I'm not saying, like you, I'm not trying to pull a race card thing here, but just kind of always wondered why players just didn't come together and go, okay, we got it better. It's because of these guys, they did start this stuff and took it to the next level. Let's pitch in and help out.
Well, in part, that's a really good question, and I've wondered the same thing. So I want to make 2 quick points about that. One is, I've thought the exact same thing, right? The NBA fines players, coaches, and staff between $200 and $300 million each year.
Wow.
And half of that money goes to support things like the National Basketball Retired Players Association, and half of that money gets given away to charity. So, you're looking at $100 to $150 million a year that is fine money, right? I mean, this is how much the players and the staff and the NBA owners make. They can absorb those kind of fines, right? Wow. And then they give that money to charity. Well, if you funded the entire pension for the ABA guys on an actuarial basis, you're talking about somewhere between 28 and $35 million. So it's a tiny portion of 1 year's worth of fine money. So that's one point. And then the second point is, you're right. If you look at the NBA salaries, if every player gave the tiniest percentage of his salary for 1 year, I mean a very small portion, it would take care of the entire issue. So, but I want to say this: I've talked to a lot of the ABA players, and when I make that point, these guys are unbelievable people. They immediately, to a man, they respond by saying, you know what, we don't hold that against these young guns. We don't hold that. We don't think it's their responsibility. Yeah. And we don't hold it against them that they make as much money as they do today, because if we had that chance, we would have done it too. And they are the first ones to say, hey, please don't make the argument that the players ought to take care of it, because we don't think that's true. And I think that speaks very highly of these guys.
Oh, that's admirable. Yes.
Absolutely.
By the way, in my opinion, that's exactly why the young guys should be stepping in. But don't tell the ABA. Can you edit that out of there? Don't let the ABA guys know I said that.
No. I think that needs to stay in, because you know what? I bet you there's a lot of young guys that do think like that, but they just haven't, followed through on it,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah.
All right, Rick. Hey, man, we got about 8.5 minutes up here, man. Anything else you want to throw in? Oh, hey, I just got a message from Brian too. He was on the court. There's still we got another guy that helps out on the show. Brian Bonds. He used to play with the Milwaukee Bucks, and actually Matt Calvin was his coach one time. And he helps coach kids here as well in Melbourne. So he had to apologize for not being on today.
He's on the other side of the world, essentially, from you, isn't he? Basically,
no, well, he's a few hundred, about a 45-minute flight.
Oh, I thought it was much further away. Sorry.
No, Melbourne and Sydney kind of close.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Melbourne and Sydney kind of close.
Oh, you know what? In my head, I was thinking Perth, but yes, Melbourne is. Yeah, I'm with you.
But where your friend is up the coast there, that's a good flight for me.
Yeah. I flew when I visited him. I had to fly into Brisbane to get to him.
Yeah, and Brisbane's far away from me.
Okay. All right.
Yes, CJ's having everybody over.
We're booking 2 planes. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, where's my invite, CJ?
You're in. You're in.
Every time we have a good guest on the show, it's another seat on the plane, So
okay,
now I think I'm up to 2 planes now.
Okay. All right.
It's growing, man, but we love it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you before we get out of here, we're going to let you have the last word, of course, but who was your favorite player, and who did you actually get to meet and sit down, talk to, and still keep in touch with to this day?
Well, this is really funny. I have to stick to my guns on who my favorite player was, because it's a fact. And he's now a very good friend of mine. And we get pancakes in Indianapolis together about once every 2 or 3 months. But when I was a kid, and a guy came out of San Jose State and had played all around the world for the U.S. Army and put in a couple years there, and then he got drafted by the Pacers in 1971 along with George McGinnis, and he had this unbelievably majestic, massive afro. And he could throw it down from anywhere on the court. He could jump over you and throw it down right on top of you. Dr. Dunk Hillman, he immediately became my favorite player with those long tube socks. And I mimicked him all the time. All I cared about was Darnell Hillman. And now I have the good fortune of being his friend. And like I said, we get together for pancakes. So he, by far and away, he was my favorite player. The guys I hated are now friends of mine. I hope he hears this sometime, Dan Issel. I even thought his name sounded evil. And I told him that because those guys down south on Highway 65, they were the nemesis for the Indiana Pacers. Curtis Gilmore, Louis Dampier, who came from Indianapolis, my hometown, and then went on
Daryl Carrier.
Daryl Carrier, who's a good friend of mine. Daryl Carrier, man, he's like the best 3-point shooter in history. I mean, his 3-point shooting percentage is ridiculous. He should be considered for the Hall of Fame as far as I'm concerned, if you look at his numbers.
It's funny you say that about Dan Issel, Scott. I was at an ABA game of the Carolina Cougars and I guess it was Kentucky. I don't care who it was. It was an exhibition game. It was in like October, and Issel and a guy named Tom Owens played at South Carolina, and
Big guy.
Jim Akins. Anyway, somehow an altercation took place, and I'm tell you what, there were some heavy hitters out there. There was like MMA. They were throwing down, and the security guard. I don't think it was one. Yeah. He's not about to go there and try to break it up. And I never forgot. And this didn't have any teeth. Looked like a hockey player. And but he was right in the middle of all that stuff. And I was thinking to myself, back in the day, those guys used to go at it.
Man.
Well, it's crazy being part of Dropping Dimes because I've gotten to know all those guys so well. You know, I mean, Mel Daniels and George Gervin and Julius Irving and Dan and Louis and what always stands out to me is Spencer Haywood. You know, these guys are just the greatest guys in the world. They're grounded. They are gentlemen. They are historians. They are humble. And it just gives me more and more passion every time I talk to these guys for the history of the original ABA because that, you know, the accomplishments that these guys have, and they don't demand recognition for it, right? I mean, they're just good guys that sit down and have a beer with you, and they don't want to talk about themselves, and they appreciate the fans, and they appreciate that they still sign autographs, and unbelievable group of guys.
Oh yeah. Well, guys,
Yeah,
look, go ahead, Rick. We got about to wrap up. Got like 3 minutes.
This will be quick. I was talking about Ron Perry, but also Glenn Combs.
Big Ron.
But we were talking about, and I told CJ this: the older this thing goes on, longer, the more those guys want to be relevant. I mean, you know, those guys, studs back in their day, but now they're they've gotten older, and no one knows who they are, and this is a big deal for them to be relevant again. Will you be on our podcast? Will you come in and talk to us? Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was, that was to me was a big deal. And getting Artis Gilmore, I talked to him yesterday. He had some death in his family or something, and he is just one of the classiest guys. And
cool, man. Cool. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, look, we're going to have to get close to wrapping this up. And I do want to say, Scott, I'll keep that real short too. One of the guys I always hated when he came on the court because we knew somebody was going to get fouled, somebody was going to get hurt, was Paul McKeskey. And now we're great friends, and we've had him on the show. And it's like, him and Greg Kite, we've had them both on together, and now I keep in touch with them, and they're great guys, you know. So
yeah, they were a couple of bangers, weren't they? They were a couple of bruisers.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. But hey man, look, we'd like to thank you for being on. Who said lawyers can't be fun? And
come on.
It was great, man. We hope you enjoyed yourself as well.
I did. I sure did.
Well, I know I did.
Yeah, CJ, I did. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
appreciate it very much.
It was good having a real historian of the game back on. So like I tell all the other good guests, which has been all the other good guests, that we'll have you back on again, man, and we'll get on to some other topic while we're we've so much we can go on about, So
anytime.
Thank you, man. All right, man. Well, everybody try to have a good weekend. Rick, I know you're getting ready to get on the plane and go to Europe, so be safe and check in, and we'll do the next show at 2:45 a.m. your time in Sweden, man.
No.
Hey, and by the way, shout out to Shane Heel, because I got a chance to meet him when I was over in Australia one time, and he had at a race, and he's another one of the greatest guys, nicest guy in the world. Spent a lot of time in the NBA.
Yep.
And of course, led the Australian national team, and he was a great guy. So just a quick shout out to Shane Heel.
Thank
you.
Ends
up here.
And
we'll
make sure he hears it, because we do know him. And his daughter, she tried out the NBA. She almost made it, but hey, it was good. All right, guys,
Excellent.
Everybody have a good one, and thanks for listening to ABA One-on-One. Take care.
All right, thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Well, that's going to do it for this week. Remember, you can keep up with every episode by subscribing via our website, Follow us on social media and tell your friends about us. Next week, new guests, more basketball tips, more basketball stories about the game we all love. Till then, be safe and keep your eyes on the ball.